In Argentina, the administration of Javier Milei suffered a significant defeat in Congress when the Chamber of Deputies approved a new mechanism to adjust pensions over inflation. In Palestine, at least 75 people were killed in the last 24 hours by Israeli attacks in the heart of the devastated Gaza Strip. And the International Economic Forum kicks off in the Russian city of St. Petersburg, focusing on the transition to a multipolar model of the world economy. Hello and welcome to From the South. My name is Belén de los Santos, and from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba, we begin with the news. On Tuesday in Argentina, the administration of Javier Milei suffered a significant defeat in Congress when the Chamber of Deputies approved a new mechanism to adjust pensions over inflation. After a day of negotiations, lawmakers approved the project in a historic feat that brought together a total of 162 votes from all sectors of the opposition to the administration of Javier Milei. The reform stipulates that the initial recovery of pensions should be of 8%, while the minimum amount should not be less than the value of the basic products for monthly consumption for the elderly. The reform seeks to link pensions adjustment not only to inflation but also to income. The bill will now go to the Senate, where it can be approved or sent back with amendments. And we stay in Argentina, as the Milei government is still not delivering food to soup kitchens that assist the most vulnerable sectors of the population. Although 49% of the population in the South American country is below the poverty line, the national government withholds 6,000 tons of food. Let's see more in the following report by our correspondent Carolina Silvestre.
Despite the fact that days ago the Ministry of Human Capital was ordered by the courts to immediately deliver the food it has stored in warehouses, the ministry in charge of providing social assistance ignored the order.
There are 23 pots that are made here, plus the ones in Once and Congreso.
A lot of more people come here than before?
Yes, imagine that here I have what was delivered on Friday, because now we have to write down the number of people that come. So in total, between food and toppers, it will be 7,991.
A scary number.
Yes, it is really scary, because before this government took over, we used to prepare 13 pots. We were 2 months without delivering on Wednesdays because we didn't have enough produce. So imagine how many pots were added, double.
The absence of the state is covered, in this case by the work of the Confederation of Workers of the Popular Economy in the face of the deepening food crisis caused by the adjustment policies.
The task we do here is on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays to give food to the people, mostly the elderly and homeless. We do what we can. We cook with what we have and we ask for donations. Sometimes there are times where there are no potatoes, no squash, no onions, no tomato puree, noodles or rice, chicken or meat. Sometimes it's a miracle what we have to do to be able to feed the people so that no one is left without a plate of food.
For Vanessa and her comrades, hunger can't wait. That's why they demand humanity from the current government.
If you have enough to make 10 or 12 pots, and you know that with 10 or 12 pots you can't make enough because you leave more than half of the people without eating, you know what I mean? I think there are shortages of all kinds. I think if there are shortages in a home, imagine in a dining room where so many people eat. So many people, so imagine everything.
Sabrina and Elcira are grateful for the solidarity work and denounce the lack of social assistance from the Milei administration.
I don't know if he's not a father, if he has no responsibility. Doesn't he feel something in his heart when he lets the food rot where it is in the sheds? I don't know. This man is made of stone. I have lived on the street and it is horrible. With my older daughter, we have struggled a lot. We have been through a lot of things and I don't want that to come back.
According to the interviewers, the lack of help from the national government is total for the most vulnerable sectors.
Carolina Silvestre, teleSUR, Buenos Aires.
The Venezuelan Nuestra campaign command denounced the international media manipulation to disregard electoral results and processes in the country. The general coordinator of the campaign command, Jorge Rodriguez, showed examples of manipulation carried out by the right wing through digital platforms on the elections in Mexico, comparing them with the attacks and media blockades in Venezuela. In this regard, Jorge Rodriguez warned that, just like the Mexican far right, Venezuelan extremists intend to implement a plan to commit fraud after the presidential elections on July 28th and promote violence again in the country.
The right wing has that characteristic. The right wing takes the lie, and since they have the tools, since they have the communicational tools, since they have tools for psychological warfare, they dedicate themselves to impose matrices like this. Through thousands and thousands and thousands of bots they had hired for the right-wing candidacy. Le Monde Infobae, a trash page like Infobae, says, Le Monde analyzes narco-candidate/narco-candidate. Of course, the Le Monde article is a denunciation of how they are trying to smear the good image of the leftist candidate in Mexico. But listen, if it sounds familiar to you, it is an absolute coincidence, as the people of Mexico was a victim of a mega electoral fraud. This was being said in other right-wing pages and the main Spanish Mexican media yesterday.
In this way, the director of the campaign, Venezuela Nuestra, highlighted the failed attempts of the extreme right to show alleged popularity in Venezuela ahead of the general elections in July.
This is what explains the two little buses, the 8 motorized vehicles, and the photos with the wide-angle lens. Haven't you heard about it before? This is unstoppable. I curiously went to look in Sanare and Cabudare, and the unstoppables were 2 buses that, by the way, were paid and rented, which went to Sanare with some paid and rented motorized vehicles, and a photographer brought from New York who took the photo with a wide-angle lens. This is unstoppable, and from Sanare to Cabudare, why? To set up the matrix.
Meanwhile, on Tuesday, Venezuelan Foreign Affairs Minister Ivan Gil arrived in China to strengthen bilateral relations between the two countries. The Venezuelan Foreign Affairs Minister visit will run until Friday, June 7th. Ivan Gil traveled to the city of Beijing at the invitation of his Chinese counterpart, Wang Yi. The visit seeks to continue strengthening strategic alliances between the two countries. Gil will carry out a broad agenda of assessment and follow-up of the agreements that pursue the prosperity of both nations.
The China-Venezuela strategic partnership has been a model of solidarity for almost 50 years under the principles of mutual respect, equality, solidarity, and non-intervention, being a pillar of the new multipolar geopolitics. With the arrival of Commander Hugo Chavez to the presidency, China-Venezuela relations acquired a strategic character by outlining a cooperation map that prioritizes shared benefits and counteracts Washington's hegemonic pretensions in Latin America and the Caribbean. In 2001, both nations raised their relationship to a strategic partnership for shared development, which laid the foundations for the China-Venezuela High-Level Joint Commission, a mechanism for planning and executing cooperation projects that came into effect after Jiang Zemin's visit to Caracas. As of 2013, a new stage in Beijing-Caracas relations began with the leadership of Nicolás Maduro and Xi Jinping, consolidating themselves as key partners beyond the economic, commercial, and financial spheres. Both heads of state signed cooperation projects that are currently reflected in more than 600 strategic agreements based on a humanistic vision of shared development that seeks to satisfy the needs of the people under the premise of guaranteeing the prosperous progress of the Beijing-Caracas partnership.
And the government of China and Venezuela signed 31 bilateral agreements under the all-weather strategic partnership. The agreement signed by both countries at the 17th High-Level Joint Commission showed the scope of the dynamic alliance that aims at comprehensive development and a broad potential in various areas of the economy. Of the 31 agreements, 10 are cooperation instruments that prioritize the areas of economy, health, mining, housing, electric energy, and telecommunications, among others. 18 other agreements were signed in the areas of politics, economics, trade, education, science and technology, airspace, and communication. And finally, both countries agreed on 3 cooperation documents also linked to the areas of development included in the Bolivarian economic agenda. Now let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Palestine, at least 75 people were killed in the last 24 hours by Israeli attacks in the heart of a devastated Gaza Strip. Heavy Israeli bombardment claimed the lives of 11 civilians in the Al-Maghazi refugee camp after destroying several homes. Medical sources reported that morgues are overflowing and hospitals are struggling to cope with an increase in casualties following attacks by Zionist fighter jets and artillery in densely populated city of Deir al-Balah. Since the beginning of its genocidal war in Gaza, at least 36,550 Palestinians have been killed by Israel, while some 83,000 have been wounded and thousands of corpses lie under the rubble. And the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees warned that the citizens are facing a growing humanitarian crisis following the Israeli aggression against Gaza. Recent reports by the United Nations affirm that the health crisis in Gaza has been on the rise, and the main effects on citizens are injuries, trauma, mental disorders, and infectious diseases spread by the lack of basic services. The organization warned that in Gaza there is little medical attention and that malnutrition is advancing at an accelerated rate after the destruction of most of the territory and with it the livelihood of the population. The United Nations has repeatedly called on the international community to promote a ceasefire in Gaza to address the humanitarian crisis in the territory. We stay on topic as the Slovenian government and parliament recognized Palestine as an independent state. The Slovenian parliament voted overwhelmingly in favor of the move, following in the recent steps of 3 other European countries, Spain, Norway, and Ireland. Slovenia first began the recognition process in early May, but hastened the process in reaction to Israel's latest attacks on the southern Gaza city of Rafah, resulting in a devastating humanitarian crisis. More than 140 countries recognize a Palestinian state, more than 2/3 of the United Nations.
Danes je velik
Today is a big and important step. Slovenia has adopted a historic decision about the recognition of the Palestine state. I'm proud that both the government and parliament had the courage needed and that I was part of all this. Our main message is that we want that injustices done to the Palestinian people are repaired. And we recognize the Palestinian people's right to self-determination.
We now move on to other topics. Several Latin American countries are experiencing the climate crisis with heat waves, forest fires, and water supply shortages.
Guatemala is going through a severe water and environmental crisis due to the forest fires that destroyed more than 40,000 hectares of forest between December 2023 and May 2024. The nation also suffered a drought that wiped out the crops of thousands of families. In Honduras, people are going through a severe drought, forest fires, and a layer of polluted air, which covers most of the country's departments. The government has recommended the use of masks due to the high levels of pollution. In El Salvador, uncertainty due to the effects of climate change and the current political situation have affected the country's youth. Salvadorans migrate to flee the drought and persecution brought on by Nayib Bukele's government state of exception. During the first 5 months of 2024, the effects of climate change had a strong impact on Latin America, affecting the quality of life of its population.
And we go now to South Africa, where authorities reported on Tuesday at least 22 people killed on the eastern coast after flooding caused by torrential rains and fierce winds. Authorities said also that 2 rare tornadoes were spotted, temperatures plunged, and snow fell in some central regions. A spokesperson from Nelson Mandela Bay municipality stated that more than 2,000 people have been evacuated from the area. Local authorities launched an appeal for donations of clothing, food, and blankets in this context. The National Meteorological Institute reported that the country is in the grip of a cut-off low-pressure system marked by heavy rains and a cold snap that can also bring hail, snow, and strong winds. Now we have a final short break, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience, you can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and also share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with teleSUR. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The International Economic Forum kicked off in the Russian city of St. Petersburg, focusing on the transition to a multipolar model of the world economy. It is one of the world's largest economic forums, which annually brings together political, businesses, academic, and other leaders to discuss the most relevant economic issues in emerging markets and the world. The event has been held annually since 1997, and since 2005 it has been sponsored by the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, who also confirmed his participation in this year's edition that will last until June 8th. Over 18,000 people from 139 countries and territories will attend the event in spite of the thousands of Western sanctions illegally imposed on Russia. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced on Tuesday his victory in the general elections, while the votes were still being counted, in which his party and those of his allies have a narrow majority to secure a third consecutive term. India's Electoral Commission announced that the Indian People's Party was leading with 240 seats out of the 543 that make up the lower house of parliament, and that the coalition to which it belongs was leading with 285 seats out of the 272 needed to form a majority. The results indicate that the head of government, Narendra Modi, will need the support of other parties to govern, an unprecedented fact in his various previous mandates. The Prime Minister indicated that during his third term, he will continue with the good work of the last decade to meet the aspirations of the citizens.
Continuously, for the third time, the people's love and blessings boost our morale and give new strength to our resolve. We, as Indians, move forward together and advance the nation. In the third term, the country will write a new chapter of significant decisions.
U.S. President Joe Biden signed on Tuesday an executive order to close the border with Mexico and reduce the number of people who can apply for asylum in the United States. The initiative allowed U.S. authorities to close the border with Mexico if the daily average of migrants encounters reaches 2,500 at the official port of entry. According to a senior administration official, the shutdown would go into effect immediately since this threshold has already been met. The border would reopen only once the number falls to 1,500. Experts estimate the measure shows Biden is taking action ahead of the November elections and after most Republicans and some Democrats in the Senate rejected a border security bill in February.
In the United States, this action will help us gain control of our border, restore order into the process. This ban will remain in place until the number of people trying to enter illegally is reduced to a level that our system can effectively manage. We'll carry out this order consistent with all our responsibilities under international law, every one of them.
After Biden's announcements, migrants in Mexico expressed their views on the situation.
The only thing I would ask is that the U.S. government give us a chance. Because we have families, children to provide for. We don't come here for pleasure. If we had all we needed, we wouldn't come.
The only option is to enter the U.S. because we don't have the means to return. Because in the same way it was hard to cross all Mexico, it would be equally hard to return.
And the International Festival of Spanish Literature, Benengeli 2024, will hold its fourth edition in 12 cities around the world. The festival will be held from June 10th to 14th through a unique neural network of global dimensions activated by the Cervantes Institute, a worldwide nonprofit organization created by the Spanish government to promote Spanish language and culture. More than 110 authors from 24 countries will discuss, reflect, write, and speak in Spanish and about Spanish language, some in front of an audience and others through the radio or in online form. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and also on TikTok. For TeleSUR English, my name is Belén de los Santos. Thank you for watching.